Emma Collins never imagined her entire life could collapse in just one morning. Fired, humiliated, left wandering the freezing streets with nothing but the weight of her mother's illness and a future that seemed already stolen. Her world was crumbling until she saw him. A weary single dad, clutching his little girl under a thin coat, shivering on the steps of a closed cafe. No home, no warmth, no hope. For a split second, Emma almost walked away. She had nothing left to give, but the child's eyes, Sophie's eyes, pleaded louder than words. Against all logic, Emma opened her door that night, not knowing the man she saved was about to become the new CEO of the very company that destroyed her. This was not just an act of kindness, it was the spark of a destiny no one could have predicted, a story of betrayal, survival, and the shocking twist that would change Emma's life forever. Snow crunched under Emma's boots as she forced herself to take one step closer. The man lifted his head, eyes hollow yet strangely gentle. The little girl buried her face deeper into his coat, trembling. "Hi," Emma's voice cracked. "I have a small apartment nearby. It's warm. I made soup earlier. You can stay tonight." The man froze, as if unsure whether to trust her. Then he looked at his daughter. The child's lips were turning blue. He exhaled a broken breath. "Thank you. My name is Daniel. This is Sophie." Emma smiled at the girl. "Hi, Sophie. Let's get you warm, okay?" Inside Emma's modest apartment, the air smelled of garlic and thyme. Daniel helped Sophie out of her damp socks, revealing tiny toes red from the cold. Emma instantly fetched a dry pair from her drawer. "Thank you," Daniel murmured. His voice carried both exhaustion and dignity. Emma poured steaming soup into 3 bowls. Sophie took a spoonful, her eyes lighting up. "It tastes like a restaurant," she whispered. Daniel chuckled for the first time that night. For a moment, the storm outside didn't exist. Later, as Emma cleared dishes, she caught Daniel fixing her squeaky cabinet door. "You didn't have to," she said. "Old habit," he replied softly. "When I can't fix the big things, I fix the small ones." Emma's lips curved into the first genuine smile of her day, while Sophie played with crayons on the rug. Emma sat on the floor beside her. The girl shyly held up a crooked little bracelet made of green wire and 2 plastic beads. "I made this for you." Emma's throat tightened. "For me?" Sophie nodded. "You're the first person who smiled at me today." Tears blurred Emma's vision. She hugged Sophie tightly, her heart breaking and healing at the same time. That messy little bracelet, ugly, imperfect, fragile, was suddenly the most beautiful gift she had ever received. Daniel watched from the couch, silent but moved. In that moment, 3 broken souls sat in a tiny apartment, bound together by warmth, by kindness, and by a fragile circle of wire that meant more than words could ever say. Emma did not know it yet. But that night was not charity. It was destiny knocking on her door. The morning light slipped through Emma's thin curtains, painting the room in pale gold. She stirred, half expecting the soft hum of a child or the low voice of Daniel murmuring thanks again. But the apartment was silent. Too silent. Emma sat up quickly. The couch where they had slept was empty. The blankets were neatly folded. Sophie's little sweater, washed, dried, smelling faintly of lavender, hung carefully on the back of a chair. Her heart pounded. "Daniel?" she called softly. No answer. She hurried into the kitchen, hoping to hear footsteps or laughter. Instead, the sink was spotless. The pot she'd used for soup washed and dried. Every sign of their presence erased. And then she saw it. On the small round table by the window lay a crisp white handkerchief, folded with military precision. Resting on top was a single piece of paper, folded in half. Emma's fingers trembled as she opened it. The handwriting was strong, deliberate. Just 2 words. "Thank you, Edith D." No last name. No phone number, no promise of return, just silence pressed into ink. Her throat tightened. She pressed the note to her chest as tears burned behind her eyes. Inside the handkerchief was something else, a crayon drawing, bold, messy strokes of yellow and green. A woman with long hair stood smiling, holding a crooked green bracelet in her hand. Beside her was a tall man and a little girl, all 3 holding hands under a sky filled with stars. Emma collapsed into the nearest chair, unable to hold back the sobs. It had only been one night, one bowl of soup, one act of kindness, yet it had mattered. To Sophie, to Daniel, and now, to her. She pinned the drawing to the refrigerator with a magnet. Next to it, she placed the little bracelet, the ugliest, most beautiful thing she had ever received. In the morning light, the green wire glistened like stained glass. For the first time in years, Emma felt seen, not as a failed employee, not as a struggling daughter, but as someone who mattered. But the silence of the apartment was deafening. They were gone, and she had no idea if she would ever see them again. What Emma didn't know was that this disappearance was not an ending. It was the beginning of a story that would shatter her past and rewrite her future. Days blurred into one another. Emma Collins printed resumes on cheap paper, her fingers smudged with ink, her hope thinning like the edges of the pages. She walked from cafe to boutique to office building, handing out applications, begging silently for someone to give her a chance. But the rejections piled up like bricks on her chest. "We're looking for someone with more experience. You don't have the right degree. You seem too soft for this environment. Too soft." Those words clung to her like a curse. Each dismissal scraped away another layer of her dignity. Emma began avoiding mirrors because the reflection only showed a tired woman, eyes hollow, shoulders heavy, a shadow of who she used to be. Then, one evening, as the sky burned gray and orange, her phone rang. The hospital. Her heart slammed against her ribs. Emma sprinted 12 blocks, lungs burning, because she couldn't afford a cab. When she stumbled into the sterile white hallway, a nurse met her with a clipboard and a practiced look of concern. "Your mother suffered a mild heart attack. She's stable, but she'll need new medication, extended observation, and follow-up care." Emma's world tilted. Words like medication, observation, care turned into dollar signs flashing before her eyes. How would she pay for any of this? She nodded numbly, the sound in her ears muffled, like she was drowning. The walk home felt endless. Her legs ached, but her chest hurt worse. By the time she reached her apartment, tears she had held back spilled freely. She slammed the door shut behind her and collapsed against it. The silence inside was unbearable. Her eyes landed on the refrigerator. Still pinned there was Sophie's drawing, the smiling woman with yellow hair holding hands with a little girl and a man beneath a sky full of stars. Next to it hung the crooked green bracelet. Emma's body trembled. Her hand shot out, fingers curling around the magnet. She wanted to rip it all down, throw it in the trash, erase the memory. Hope hurt too much. Hope was a cruel joke. But just as she was about to yank it away, Sophie's voice whispered in her mind, "You're the first person who smiled at me today." Emma froze. Her hand dropped. The magnet clicked back into place. And that was when she broke. She slid down to the floor, her back pressed against the cabinets, knees pulled to her chest, and she cried. Not polite tears, not silent weeping, but raw heaving sobs that shook her body. She grieved for her job, for her mother's failing health, for the crushing weight of being invisible in a world that demanded toughness she didn't have. "I don't want to give up," she whispered into the emptiness, "but I'm so tired. I'm so tired." The light above flickered, casting shifting shadows on the wall. The crooked bracelet glimmered faintly, defying the darkness. Somehow, it had survived, and so had she. Though she wasn't sure how much longer she could, this was Emma's breaking point, a night where hope felt like poison, where her future looked like ash. Yet destiny was already moving in the shadows. The next chapter of her life, the one she could never have imagined, was waiting just beyond this despair. It was a Tuesday morning when Emma's phone buzzed. She almost ignored it. Unknown number, and her spirit was too drained for another rejection. But something inside whispered, "Answer." "Hello? Emma Collins speaking." "Miss Collins?" A clipped professional voice replied. "This is Sarah from Sterling Corporation's Human Resources. Our CEO would like to schedule a meeting with you tomorrow at 10 a.m. Emma froze. Her pulse hammered in her ears. I don't work there anymore. I was fired." "Yes, we're aware," Sarah said calmly. "Still, the request stands. The CEO specifically asked for you by name. Her fingers went numb. Did I do something wrong? No, Miss Collins. Please just come in. When the call ended, Emma stood in her small kitchen, staring at the phone like it was a loaded weapon. Her reflection in the microwave door showed messy hair, dark circles under her eyes, and an apron stained with broth. Why would a CEO want to see me? That night, she barely slept. By morning, she ironed the only blouse she owned and pulled on her black slacks. On the subway ride, her stomach twisted, dread curling in her chest. Every step toward Sterling's skyscraper felt like walking into a lion's den. The receptionist greeted her politely, guiding her to the top floor. The elevator doors opened into a hallway lined with abstract art and polished glass. Emma's heart thudded so loudly she thought the guard at the door might hear it. Go right in, the assistant said, opening massive double doors. Emma stepped inside and froze. Behind a sleek wooden desk stood Daniel Miller, dressed in a perfectly tailored navy suit. The man she had shared soup with. The man whose daughter had given her a bracelet. The man she thought she'd never see again. Her lips parted, her voice a whisper. Daniel? Before he could answer, a small figure dashed across the room. Emma! Sophie squealed, flinging herself into Emma's arms. Tears sprang to Emma's eyes as she hugged the little girl tight, overwhelmed by the innocent joy radiating from her. Emma looked up at Daniel, breathless. I don't understand. Daniel smiled, but his eyes held the same softness she remembered. Please, sit with me. I owe you an explanation. They moved to a seating area by the window. Sophie nestled against Emma's arm like she belonged there. Daniel leaned forward, his voice steady but filled with something deeper. I bought Sterling Corporation 2 weeks ago. I'm the new CEO. Emma blinked, stunned. You're… what? I stepped away from business after my wife passed, he admitted quietly. That night you found us. We had just lost our temporary housing. I had nothing. And then you opened your door. His gaze locked on hers. You didn't know who I was. You just helped. No questions, no judgment. Emma's pulse raced. The reality hit like thunder. The stranger she had pitied was now the most powerful man in the company that had destroyed her life. Daniel continued, his voice low but firm. That act of kindness reminded me of the kind of leader I want to be, and it reminded me of the kind of people this company should value. Emma, I didn't call you here to punish you. I called you here because I want to offer you something better. Emma's breath caught. Her world tilted again, only this time not into despair, but into the impossible. The office was silent except for the faint hum of the city below. Daniel leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees, his gaze heavy with something Emma couldn't quite name. My wife's name was Caroline, he began softly. She was brilliant, fierce, funny. She had this way of making every room feel alive. And then, one night, a car accident took her away. Just like that. 8 months ago. Sophie and I lost the center of our world. Emma's chest tightened. She hadn't expected this. Not from the polished CEO before her. For a moment, he wasn't the man in a tailored suit. He was just a grieving husband, a broken father. After the funeral, Daniel continued, I tried to return to business, to lead board meetings, to be the man everyone expected. But every time I stepped into a conference room, I felt like an intruder in my own life. I couldn't breathe. So I walked away. Sophie and I spent months drifting, short-term rentals, quiet towns, places Caroline had once dreamed of visiting. I wasn't running exactly, I just didn't know who I was without her. Emma listened, her heart aching with every word. Suddenly the memory of that snowy night made perfect sense, the exhaustion in his eyes, the desperation masked by dignity. That night outside the cafe, Daniel said, his voice catching. We were supposed to check into a short-term apartment. The booking fell through. Every motel was full. The snow was coming down harder. I had nowhere else to go. And then you appeared, his eyes locked on Emma's. You opened your door, shared your meal, gave my daughter her first laugh in weeks. You saved us. Emma, you reminded me that kindness still exists in this world. Emma's throat tightened. I wasn't saving anyone. I just couldn't walk away. Daniel shook his head gently. That's exactly why it mattered. He rose, walked to his desk, and pulled out a slim folder. Inside was a formal letter embossed with the Sterling Corporation seal. He set it on the table between them. I didn't call you here to revisit the past. I called you here because I want you to be part of the future. I want you to come back, not as a receptionist, but as the head of employee wellness and community outreach. Emma blinked in disbelief. What? Daniel, I don't have the qualifications. I didn't finish college. I was just... You were never just anything. Daniel interrupted firmly. His voice carried no hesitation. I don't need another polished resume. I need someone who understands hardship, who knows what it means to choose compassion over convenience. I need someone with heart. That's what you showed me when you had nothing to give, yet gave anyway. Emma's hands shook as she touched the folder. The salary printed inside was more than she had ever dreamed. The title was one she never thought she'd earn. Her voice broke. What if I fail? What if I can't live up to this? Daniel leaned closer, his eyes steady. Emma, I saw your strength when you thought no one was watching. You showed up, you opened your door, you didn't wait to feel ready, you acted. That's the kind of leadership this company needs. Tears welled in Emma's eyes. She looked down at Sophie, who was tracing little circles on her sleeve, smiling as if this moment was the most natural thing in the world. Maybe, Emma thought, this wasn't the end at all. Maybe this was where everything truly began. For the first time in months, Emma Collins walked through the doors of Sterling Corporation not as a forgotten receptionist, but as the new head of employee wellness and community outreach. The title felt surreal. The paycheck was enough to keep her mother safe. And yet, the moment she stepped into the office, she felt the stares. At first it was subtle, side glances near the coffee machine, hushed voices at the printer, but whispers soon grew into venom. She was just a receptionist, right? I heard she didn't even finish college. Let's be real. Nobody climbs that fast unless there's something going on with the boss. Emma tried to drown it out. She buried herself in work, organizing childcare support programs, starting health initiatives, checking in on exhausted employees. Her door stayed open. She listened when no one else did. But the more she succeeded, the sharper the whispers cut. One afternoon, passing the copier, she overheard a man snicker. Guess saving the CEO from the cold gets you more than a thank you these days. The words sliced through her like glass. Emma barely made it back to her office before the tears came. She shut the door, collapsed in her chair, and covered her face with trembling hands. Maybe they're right, she thought bitterly. Maybe I don't deserve this. A knock startled her. The door opened slowly, and Daniel stepped inside. His eyes fell on her tear-streaked cheeks. He didn't ask questions. He simply knelt beside her chair, took her hand, and whispered, "Come with me." That Thursday afternoon, a company-wide meeting was called. The entire staff gathered in the auditorium, buzzing with speculation. Emma sat in the front row, her stomach in knots. Daniel walked to the podium, not in a suit, but in a simple sweater and slacks. He looked less like a CEO and more like a man about to bare his soul. "Many of you know Emma Collins," he began, his voice steady. "Some of you have worked beside her, some under her leadership, but I want you to know who she was before this." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Emma's pulse pounded. Months ago, during a snowstorm, Emma opened her door to a man and a little girl with nowhere to go. She didn't know I was Daniel Miller, investor, or that I would soon buy Sterling Corporation. She only knew we were cold, scared, and alone. She gave us food. She gave us warmth. She gave us dignity. The room fell silent. Daniel reached into his pocket and pulled out something small. He held it up for everyone to see. A crooked bracelet made of green wire and 2 cheap plastic beads. "This," Daniel said softly, "was a gift my daughter Sophie made for Emma that night. She called it her thank you bracelet. I've carried it ever since, because without this bracelet, I wouldn't be standing here. Without Emma, this company wouldn't be what it's becoming." She reminded me that leadership is not about power, it's about heart. A heavy silence blanketed the room. Then slowly, one person began to clap. Another followed. Within seconds, the entire auditorium erupted in applause. Emma sat frozen, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. Not from shame this time, but from release. She had been seen, truly seen. Daniel looked directly at her, his voice carrying through the roar of applause. So the next time you wonder why Emma Collins leads in this company, remember this bracelet. Remember what real leadership looks like. Emma's heart swelled with something she hadn't felt in years. Pride. The whispers couldn't touch her now, because the truth, her truth, was finally in the light. The weeks after the town hall meeting felt like stepping into a different world. For the first time, when Emma walked through the hallways of Sterling, people didn't look away. They smiled. They stopped to chat. They trusted her. She poured her heart into her new role, launching wellness programs, arranging flexible schedules for parents, creating support groups for employees battling illness. She visited every department, learning names, listening to stories others ignored. Slowly, the walls between titles and people began to crumble. But the biggest change wasn't just at work. It was at home, every weekend. Emma found herself with Daniel and Sophie. What started as casual dinners turned into traditions. Saturday pancakes with too many sprinkles. Sunday hikes along golden trails. Movie nights where Sophie insisted on popcorn drowned in butter. One evening, Sophie tugged Emma's sleeve, handing her a crayon drawing. 3 stick figures stood under a sky of stars, one in a tie, one in a dress, and a little girl between them. At the bottom, in crooked letters, it read, "Dad, Emma, and me." Emma's throat tightened as Sophie whispered, "I asked God to send someone like you." And he did. Her eyes met Daniel's across the room. No words were needed. In the silence, everything was understood. At Sterling, Emma's presence softened the culture. Employees who once whispered now confided in her. They brought problems to her office, knowing she wouldn't dismiss them. She became a bridge between executives and staff, between exhaustion and hope. Daniel often watched her from afar, marveling not just at her competence, but at her heart. And then came the night that changed everything. It was a Thursday evening. The company's annual charity gala. Lights shimmered, champagne glasses clinked, and music drifted through the grand ballroom. Emma wore a simple navy dress, her hair swept back. She felt out of place among gowns and jewels, but Daniel's hand on hers steadied her. Midway through the evening, Daniel stepped onto the stage. Conversations hushed, cameras flashed. He wasn't holding a glass of champagne, he was holding something small in his hand. "I want to share a story," he began, his voice echoing through the hall. "A story about a woman who changed my life." Emma's stomach tightened. Her heart raced. She opened her door one snowy night, not knowing she was saving a father and his daughter. She didn't ask who I was. She didn't expect anything in return. She simply gave us warmth, food, and hope. And because of her, I stand here today not just as a CEO, but as a better man. He paused, pulling the crooked wire bracelet from his pocket. Gasps rippled through the room. "This," he said, holding it up, "is the thank you bracelet my daughter made that night. It may be uneven and fragile, but to me it's the most precious thing I own, because it represents the moment Emma Collins reminded me what truly matters." Emma's breath caught. The crowd was utterly silent, and then Daniel dropped to one knee. Gasps turned into shocked murmurs. Sophie ran onto the stage, clutching Emma's hand and looking up with bright, expectant eyes. "Emma Collins," Daniel said, his voice thick with emotion. "You were our light when everything was dark. You gave Sophie laughter when she had none, and you gave me hope when I thought it was gone forever. Will you be our forever home?" Emma's tears spilled freely. The ballroom blurred, the noise of the crowd fading until there was only Daniel on one knee and Sophie's small hand squeezing hers. "Yes," Emma whispered. Her voice trembled, but it carried through the hall. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." Applause exploded like thunder. Confetti drifted from the ceiling like falling snow. Sophie squealed with joy, hugging them both as the crowd cheered. Daniel slid a sapphire ring onto Emma's finger, but her other hand clutched the crooked bracelet, still shining under the lights. In that moment, Emma realized what had begun as one act of kindness on a freezing night had blossomed into something unshakable. A family, a future, a forever. The lake shimmered beneath the late spring sun, its surface rippling with golden light. Wild daisies lined the stone path, swaying gently in the breeze. There were no grand chandeliers, no endless rows of roses, no gold or glitter, just simplicity, just love. Emma Collins stood at the edge of the aisle, her mother at her side, stronger now, smiling through tears. Emma wore an ivory dress, plain and elegant, her hair loose around her shoulders. On her wrist was no bouquet, but the crooked green bracelet Sophie had once given her, its wire glinting softly like stained glass. As the music began, Emma walked slowly toward Daniel. He waited beneath the arch of swaying trees, Sophie standing proudly beside him, holding both their rings in tiny hands. Daniel's eyes never left Emma's. When she reached him, Sophie slipped her small hand into Emma's, whispering, "We did it." The ceremony was brief, but every word carried weight. Daniel's voice broke as he vowed to never let Emma walk through storms alone again. Emma promised to be Sophie's second mother, her safe place, her forever smile. And then came the kiss. The guests erupted in cheers, petals and laughter filling the air. Sophie squealed, throwing her arms around them both. For the first time, Emma felt not like an outsider looking for belonging, but like the heart of a family that had always been waiting for her. Later, as the sun dipped toward the horizon, the three of them walked hand in hand along the lake's edge. Their shadows stretched long across the stone path. In Emma's other hand, she carried a folded piece of paper, Sophie's old drawing of three figures holding hands beneath a sky full of stars, the bracelet on her wrist, the drawing in her hand. Symbols of a night that had once seemed small but had rewritten every chapter of her life. She looked back at the skyline in the distance, where Stirling's tower rose against the fading light. Once, that place had taken everything from her. Now it had given her everything. Emma leaned her head on Daniel's shoulder as Sophie skipped ahead, her laughter echoing like bells. This was not the end. This was the beginning. Of of family. Of forever. A night of kindness during a snowstorm changed lives forever, reminding us that small gestures can spark love, hope, and healing. Share now.